Hi, everybody. So today we're going to go over how to find your sources and then also how to pull quotes from those sources. So for your research paper, you're required to use a number of outside sources. Um, and we'll go over some ways that you can find those things and then also kind of how to use them. So first of all, we want to make sure that our sources are appropriate for whichever assignment it is that you're working on. Remember that your sources should be scholarly. That means that they're from a journal or a book. And then also each source should have its own unique function. So for instance, some things that sources can do in the research paper are providing background information, defining the problem, defining specific terms that we need to be familiar with, give us multiple perspectives on either the problem or the solution, provide solutions, address naysayers, provide support or evidence, and the list goes on and on. So just make sure that if you're using a source, you have some idea of what your goal is for using that source, because we don't want to just throw quotes in there, for no reason. So some places to look for your sources. Number one, by the time you start writing your assignment, you should have read and annotated several sources for class and for discussions already. You can use any of those sources if you'd like, if you're writing about that particular topic, and you can always go back to previous modules on Canvas and open up those sources that way. So that's one way to find your sources. Also, you can use databases to find sources. So for whichever campus you're on, I have the written instructions of sort of step-by-step how to find those things so that you can use those databases to get scholarly sources for your essays. And remember that I will post these directions on Canvas so that you can refer back to these. So I'm going to click through these, but they will be there on Canvas for you if you need them. Okay, so the next step when you're starting to plan your research paper is to organize your paper. So make sure you have a plan before you start writing. You can create an outline, a web, a bubble diagram, however you choose to organize works for me, as long as it works for you. But remember that there are some things that you should definitely include while you're planning. So one of those is, of course, an introduction. Remember that in your intro for this assignment, you should explain the problem that you're researching. And we should know by the end of your intro what action you want us to take, and how you're asking us to sort of address this thing. You should also define the issue at hand. So we need some background information so we know what's going on and why it matters. So this is, beyond your introduction. That's another thing that you need to do early on in your paper. You should also discuss the problem's complexity. So there are lots of ways that you can do this, but looking at things like what's causing it, giving us some perspectives on it, and so on. After that, we also need to see what type of change needs to occur. So this is the big picture solution section, right? What are those big picture changes that you would like to see? And then also how individuals are expected to get involved to help make that change happen. And then a conclusion. Make sure that you're not simply restating what you've already said. Instead, your conclusion might do things like talk about the implications of ignoring this problem, encourage readers to take action, and so on. Remember that your paper doesn't need to go in this particular order. It's just one that I've seen work for a lot of my students. Typically, we have an introduction followed by a discussion of the problem at hand. Then those big picture solutions are discussed, and then individual involvement is discussed, and then we've got your conclusion. But those definitely don't have to go in that order if you find something that works better for you. So once you have a clear plan for how you're going to organize your paper, then it's time to look at your sources and figure out where you can use these sources to support your claims. So that's the important thing here. Make sure that your sources are there to support you. Your own text should come before and after any quote or paraphrase. So we definitely don't want sources to speak for us, right? So when you're using a source, you can paraphrase it or you can quote directly. In either case, you still have to let us know where you got your information from. And you're going to do that by citing your quote or your paraphrase in MLA format to make sure that you avoid plagiarism. So paraphrasing a source, this happens when you are putting someone else's information into your own words. So anytime that you're researching something and you're just sort of summing up what you've found and letting us know what's going on, or what someone has to say about something, but you don't quote them directly, meaning you don't use their information word for word, you still need to cite and you still need to let us know where that information is coming from. So a good rule of thumb that I've found works for my students is if you can restate the information using 3 or less of the original words, it's probably okay to just use a paraphrase. Whereas if you really need those same words in order to get the point across, then it might be a better idea to just quote directly. So this is an example of an original text followed by a paraphrase. You can see it's much shorter, and this student has gone ahead and explained this particular idea in their own words. Just because it's been explained in their own words, however, doesn't mean that they don't have to cite, right? So the citation is still there. On the other hand, when we're quoting sources directly, this isn't, that's when you're using, specific word for word quote from somebody. And of course, you do need to cite when you're doing that. So this is an example of citing from a grading contract where we have to have the specific words, and we can't really sum this up, in our own words. So of course, that's going to be cited. So more examples of direct quotes. Even though this is about a grading contract and not necessarily something, about research, it's still important anytime we use a quote to make sure that that quote is sort of sandwiched in there, right? We don't want to just have a quote that appears out of nowhere with no context. So I've color-coded this to show you how much is the student's language and how much is the quoted information. This is sort of what we're going for, even in your research paper. It should definitely start off with you letting us know what is going on and what we need to get from this quote. Then show us that quoted information that supports your claims, right, and shows that those claims are reasonable and correct. And then follow up with more commentary from you. So just make sure that your sort of quote to commentary ratio is always more balanced this way in the favor of lots of commentary from you rather than a huge quote with just a little bit of information from yourself. So you can also look here to see, I've color-coded it a bit differently to show you signal phrases, setup, and explanation. So if you're not familiar with the sort of quote sandwich method that I talk about, this is what that looks like. And again, by the time you're writing a research paper, you've probably seen and heard about the quote sandwich method and are probably tired of hearing about it. But that's always what we're aiming for with our quotes, right? Make sure that the quoted information is small, the information coming from you is more important. Make sure that you set those quotes up with signal phrases, cite them in MLA, and then do lots of explaining. So when to use quotes, remember that that quoted information is only there to support you. Your claims can be about whatever you would like to, but remember that your claim comes first and then the quote is there to provide you backup. So quick recap on using sources. Make sure that you find sources that are scholarly and are going to help you discuss your topic. You can use sources we read for class and or find your own on the library databases. And make sure that you have a plan for how you're going to incorporate those sources into your essay. Make sure that they all have some sort of a purpose, and they should be helping you to do one of these things, right? We need to support our discussion of the problem, or our discussion of big picture solutions, or our discussion of individual involvement. If the sources that you have can't help you with any of these things, then you might need to reevaluate those sources. Okay, as always, questions, need help, need additional support, talk to me, talk to your groups, and or talk to a tutor.